okay, we will be talking about how innovative companies become billion-dollar unicorns. First, okay, I have 4 actually images of companies that most of you should be rather familiar, or you may have heard it in the press, or maybe you have even come across some of the services. These are all what we collectively known as young innovative companies at the beginning, okay? But things have changed since our founding years. Okay, some of you may say, oh, you know, unicorn, yes, I heard of Airbnb, okay, the one where I go for shared accommodation. Okay, it is like a hotel, but it's not really a hotel. Of course, Grab, okay, which is one of the local unicorns at one stage of time. Okay, and then of course TikTok, and of course SpaceX, which recently got in the news for the space travel, where they bring some billionaires to space, okay, even for a short little tour. So these are actually what we see as unicorns, or rather the press, the media likes to collectively address them as unicorns. So tonight, one of the biggest tasks I need to do, I will need to explain to you a bit more about what's a unicorn and what are the types of unicorn, how do this as a startup company eventually evolve and become what the common public knows as unicorns. Okay, so these businesses are all common. They have one feature. They are not in the same industry, but they are all worth billions of dollars. Okay, let's look at actually a bit more, okay, at definitions. I always like to start with definition because that way we can align ourselves better. What's a unicorn? The proper definition of a unicorn is a venture-backed private equity technology company that's usually valued at $1 billion or more. Okay, so one characteristic, they must be venture-backed. Okay, they must belong to actually not only just the investors, that means the shareholders, they must also be backed by a third party, usually known as a venture capitalist. They must be private, okay, and many times they are technology driven. Okay, and of course the last characteristic, they must be worth a lot of money. Some of you have heard about unicorns, which is a very common collectively term. But when you deep dive a bit more, unicorns are just like your actually all these collectible items that you see, okay, where they evolve. They will also change with times. Unicorn is 1 billion. Decacorn is 10 billion. Okay, and of course you have the third version, which is hectacorn. Hectacorn is $100 billion worth. So that's a very scary amount of money that we're talking about. And what common interesting thing is, are there a lot of unicorns? Okay, yes, there are. In the world right now, as we speak, there are 977 unicorns. Okay, but within these unicorns, some of them are decacorns, some of them are hectacorns. Okay, so let's look at some of the well-known hectacorns or decacorns. Okay, so top 10 unicorns, and these are all different because they are all worth $25 billion and much more. Some of the household names will be Toutiao. Okay, some of you will be questioning it. Toutiao, I never heard of it before. So what type of company is this? It's a media company. Okay, in fact, they are very common nowadays, especially among the young. Toutiao is the Chinese holding company for TikTok. Okay, I'm sure some of you heard about TikTok, but you do not know that the parent is actually known as Toutiao. Okay, that's a media company, 140 billion. SpaceX come up the ranks very quickly because of space travel, the successful launch of space maneuvers, etc. So SpaceX today, they are number 2. They are $100 billion worth. Okay, collectively, these two of them are hectacorns. Okay, the highest category of unicorns that you can see. Then followed by decacorns. Okay, Stripe. Okay, this company is interesting in the sense that they ask you, okay, as small merchants, you don't want to hold credit card machines. Okay, it's fine. All you need is a small little magnetic stripe. Okay, I'll give you a toggle. You just actually attach it to your phone and you can swipe off any credit card machines. So it's very innovative. Okay, and that's number 3, followed by a lot of others. Okay, if you're into gaming, you heard about Epic Games. If you're not in gaming, it's fine. Okay, Fortnite is the mega release of Epic Games. Okay, today a lot of youngsters are playing that every other night. Okay, or even in fact every other day. So Epic Games is the parent of that. Of course, Canva for people who are very design savvy. That's from Australia. Okay, that's 40 billion worth, and many others that you see. So collectively, these are 10 unicorns. Okay, out of these 10 unicorns, 4 of them are fintech based. Okay, so fintech seems to be quite prominent today, financial technology. So out of the top 10 unicorns, 4 of them are coming from the same industry. All right. So fast forward a bit more, I think it's important for you to understand where they stand. Okay, because earlier I mentioned they're really young. Okay, so what do you mean by young? How young? Are they just barely started? Have they been around for quite a while? Okay, for that, we need to go into the different stages of development for any particular company. So when you actually have an interesting business idea, okay, you start to say, okay, let's find a few actually shareholders, or probably let's take out some savings. You start to have a new business, you incorporate a business, right? That's a startup stage. As you go along, okay, things get better. You start to see some sales. You start to grow a bit more. You start to see people coming to you, regular customers coming to you. You hire more people. Okay, you buy more equipment. You probably start to have your own office. That's an early growth stage. All right. And finally, you will try to grow even faster. You hire even more people. You start to have your own warehouse. You start to have your own production line. Okay. You start to actually face a lot of challenges in the marketplace because people will not leave you untouched. Okay. There's a lot of firefighting as it goes along too. All right. So as you grow, you realize that actually, no matter which stage, there's an element of risk. From a startup stage where the risk is extremely high, where virtually you can fail anytime. And then as you grow, this actually curve drops a bit further down. So the risk actually gets lower and lower as time passes by, as a company becomes more established. But what is interesting here is when we talk about startup company, in this case also collective known as young innovative companies, okay, they have a very high failure rate. More than 80% of them will not make it past the first 3 years. Okay, and in fact, less than 5% will eventually become superstars. So when you talk about actually 80% of businesses failing within the first 3 years, plus less than 5% of them becoming superstars of tomorrow, the success rate is extremely daunting. Okay, even for the very seasoned business people. And that's just the way how business goes. Unless you have a very innovative idea, you probably will not survive too long, okay, in the marketplace, right? So one interesting question that people tend to ask me a lot. So these companies are young, okay? Their business owners probably depend on their own savings. They go to the banks, seek some funding, or they probably would actually have to look for other ways of finding that capital, initial startup capital. So today we are going to actually talk a bit more about something different. Some of these innovative young companies may decide to depend on venture capital. So what's venture capital? Sometimes we come across this terminology in the press as well. Or some friends may randomly throw this idea, oh, besides going to banks, besides depending on your money, maybe you can find someone who is interested to invest in your startup, or maybe give you free money to grow. Okay. And many times they're confused because they will use this word venture capital or business angels. So later tonight, I'm going to explain to you the difference. Okay. So the first definition for venture capital is a subset of private equity, and it's usually referring to equity investments at a very early stage of a business. All right. And it's given to you by a third party, someone who probably doesn't know you that well, but is willing to part with their money in return for your shares, in return for your stock. Okay, so that's how venture capital is about. And many times when venture capital is used, it's because these companies cannot be published. They have no access to a stock market. Okay, because they are so young, they don't even probably have very properly kept financial records. let alone prove to the banks that they have a solid financial performance for the last 3 years. So many times these very, very young, very immature companies will have no choice but to look for other ways of finding capital. And venture capital can be a source, a very dependable source, if they know what to do. Okay, so that brings me to the next question. So who are these venture capitalists? What do they do? Okay, and how do I know I'm talking to a venture capitalist? They do have some characteristics. Let's look at some of these characteristics. Okay, so venture capitalists, these are people who pool money. Okay, and when they pool money, they don't just look at rich individuals, okay, or investors. They turn to governments. Okay, they turn to institutions. For example, they may turn to Temasek Holdings, okay, which is actually the government's parent holding company. Okay, so they may say, oh, Temasek Holdings, I know that you have so much spare funds. Will you mind, investing in me, or maybe passing me a sum of this money? Okay, and in return, I promise to pay back with interest added on top. So Temasek Holdings could be an institution. Or you could look at very, very rich billionaires like Bill Gates. Okay, they may say, okay, I don't mind to part my money, part it with a venture capitalist so that you can grow my wealth. So venture capitalists will raise money from two sources: institutions as well as individuals, rich individuals, okay, who are usually extremely high net worth. They will finance new and growing companies for an ulterior motive, which I'm going to share with you later tonight. So for now, let's just bear in mind, they will finance new and rapidly growing companies for a return. They will buy stocks, okay? And in return for buying your stocks in these young companies, they will insist that they must take a board representation. Okay, many times it's dictated by the venture capitalists, not by the business owners. Business owners, by virtue, when you are actually turning to venture capitalists, you realize that you're going to lose a lot of say, okay, in how you're going to eventually run your business. So later I'm going to explain a bit more as well, right? They add value, and when they add value, that's because they sit on your boards. Okay, every other month, every other quarter, every other year, they're going to ask you, okay, how's your financial performance? Send me everything, from your balance sheet to your profit and loss. Okay, send me everything that you have. I'm going to scrutinize everything. Okay, so in that active participation, many times they want you to succeed. Okay, and of course, in return for an ulterior motive as well. Okay, they are going to take on high risk, so high that probably banks will shy away from. You realize that actually when you turn to a bank, banks are very, very risk averse. They normally will not let go of a particular sum of money unless you can prove to them you're financially stable, you have a proven track record, or you're able to provide collaterals on the table as guarantee. Venture capitalists are not looking for guarantees. They are high risk takers, extremely high risk takers, but in return for taking the high risk, they will expect even higher rewards. All right. Okay. And of course, they will not actually take a very short-term view. They look very long-term. Normally, it's between 3 to 5 years. They're not going to look at your first quarter and say, okay, your first quarter, your performance is no good. Sorry, I'm going to sell away all my shares. I'm going to exit from your company. They won't. They'll stay with you for at least 3 to 5 years. Okay. And finally, what's the ulterior motive? Okay. Like all businesses, the aim is to make money, not just profit. Lots and lots and lots of money. Okay. So tonight I'm going to give you an example. Okay. How are they going to use this to their benefit? Okay. Collectively in the market, venture capitalists are also known as sharks in the ocean. Okay. And these young businesses, young, very innovative businesses, privately owned, are normally the small fishes. So sharks will bite when they smell blood. Venture capitalists are referred to them as a metaphor because of this acute smell for returns as well as for profits. Okay, so going to explain that in greater details through the simple example. If you don't turn to venture capitalists, there are a lot of other business models today of laying your hands on money, funds. There's corporate bonds, there's crowdfunding, there's accelerators, and much, much more. Okay, so you will come across some of these terminologies. Corporate bonds, something very rare in Singapore, but recently Singapore Airlines just announced a corporate bond. Okay, in fact, it's a second bond issue for a long, long time by Singapore Airlines. So this allows you, okay, to be able to invest in a company, and yet you're not shareholder, you are a creditor. All right. So some of these corporate bonds are quite good in the sense they are very stable. You can also look at accelerators, okay, where they like your innovative ideas, they'll pump some money to you. Or alternatively, you go into a crowdfunding platform where you have a brilliant business idea, you share with all these investors or potential investors. I have this great idea, great product. Please invest some of your money in me. Okay. So these are some of the very, very new ways of gathering funds. But I will not elaborate on that too much because that's not the main purpose. But I just want you to be aware it may not be just venture capitalists, okay, that you can turn to if you're a young company. All right. So question, why would actually venture capitalists finance all these companies? They are looking for two things. Okay. Usually in all these young companies, especially when they're high growth, they don't have a lot of spare funds. Okay. Even if they have the spare funds, they probably can't scale. Okay. Because you have limited resources, you have limited money, you have limited know-how, you have limited connections. Okay. You don't have a track record. So they have very, very limited source of funds, and they don't really have a lot of assets, hard assets. They probably don't even own, okay, a company vehicle or an office building. They are renting, okay, or they're borrowing or they're leasing. So a lot of times their assets are know-hows. It's usually a platform. Like for example, in the case of Airbnb, okay, some people say, they are like the substitutes of hotels. But interestingly, they don't own any properties at all. Okay, Grab does not own any vehicles. What they have is a platform, it's a website, it's an app. Okay, so these are intangible assets. You can't feel, you can't see, and they don't really need to be the owners anyway. They can still prove themselves to be really exciting and really successful. Okay, all these high growth companies also show very, very quickly that they will not be able to make profits, okay, within a very short time. And because of that, okay, many of these young innovative companies are still making a loss even today. Okay, Airbnb just recently turned the corner. They just actually turned into black after so many years of operating. Grab took more than 10 years before they start to see profits, right? So you realize actually all these unicorns have one big problem. They could be valued at $1 billion, but when you ask them to open their profit and loss, it's a loss. They have no profits, but they are worth billions. So some of you may be asking, how does that work? I thought usually companies must be profitable. Otherwise, they shouldn't even survive 3 years or let alone 3 months. But this is where actually the interesting thing is. Venture capitalists are in a way responsible for finding them until they eventually succeed. Okay, so only 3% of all these businesses, young businesses, will receive VC capital. Right? So not every young business will receive because venture capitalists are equally selective as well. Right? So these VC firms, okay, they normally to protect themselves, to prove to VCs, they normally have a lot of patents, they have a lot of exciting technologies. And in many cases, they either disrupt a particular market or they change the rules of competition in a very established market. So, and that's exactly what excites the VC. You're changing the world in small little ways. And not just small little ways, you're changing it in the sense of established companies, okay, established industries, how you can actually do much better than all these proven companies. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why VCs back then to start with, besides of course the profits. Okay, and all these companies, they bring a lot of radical innovation to market, much faster than any traditional funded companies. Okay, because VC's investment, VC's injection of know-how, VC's injection of contacts. Okay, they know the right people to bring you to. So that accelerates their growth even much faster. All right. So that's one of the reasons why VCs are excited and why they want to invest in all these young, innovative companies. Okay. So let's look at the types of VC funds. So earlier I talked a bit more about business angels. Okay. Of course, I'm not going to go through every one of it. Okay. I'm going to just focus on A and B very much. But I think it's important for you to know as a VC, there are 5 categories. Okay. Usually there are 5 types of categories. You have the private VCs, you have the corporate VCs, you have the public VCs, and in this case are usually by the government. And then you have a hybrid, which is a collaboration between the private and the government. Okay. So that means you probably have an entity, say for example, like a private owned holding group, and then plus maybe Temasek Holdings. Okay, collectively they pull money together. That's how they form a hybrid VC. And then finally, I talk about that angel groups. These are business angels. Each of these subcategories are different because they have different expectations. They have different characteristics. Okay, so I'm going to focus a lot on A and B because these are the most common types. Let's look at the first type, the private VCs. Okay, these are the most common type of VCs that people see on the market. Why? Because they're abundant. They're almost everywhere. I'm not sure whether some of you heard about SoftBank, which is Japanese owned. SoftBank is one of the best well-known private VCs. Okay, they actually are the ones who sponsored, okay, not really sponsored, but invested in people like your Grab. There are people who invested in Airbnb. They are the ones who invested in actually your okay, Alibaba Group, so and so forth. So SoftBank is a very well-known private VC. Okay, they normally will have capital raised from institutions and individuals. So earlier I mentioned they don't collect money from the high net worth. They collect money from governments, from retiree funds. Okay, and they are formally known as holding groups as well. Sometimes they will actually collect all these funds. They'll create a holding company. To compensate these private VCs, they are looking for interest. Okay, I put this sum of money in, I'm going to get interest out of it. Okay, ultimately, they want IPO. They want to go for initial public offering of this actually entity that they invested in. So their fund size is really scary. Okay, it can be from a small amount of maybe about 25 million, going up all the way to like SoftBank, tens and hundreds of billions. Okay, so they have a very big, okay, war arsenal, much bigger than the business angels. Right, so don't be confused between a private VC and a business angel. Here we are talking about an investment firm with a lot of fluid cash. Okay, motivation purely financial. They just want to maximize their ROI. They are looking for IPOs, mergers and acquisition. Best if let's say the young company, right, is so successful, they can be publicly listed. That's when they are going to exit. Okay, so later we have an example to show you how they are going to profit from this whole arrangement. The second type, lesser known, but definitely in your face as well. These are what we call the corporate VCs. Okay, corporate VCs means they are owned by an organization, usually a MNC or a very large local company. Some of these example, Singtel, Cisco. Singapore, you will see people like Singtel. Okay, Singtel is actually a corporate VC. There's a corporate arm. It's known as Singtel in 08. Temasek Holdings have their own. Temasek Holdings, their corporate VC is known as Singbridge. Okay, so what does these corporate VCs do? How are they different from private VCs? They normally will invest in a young startup for strategic reasons. They'll tell you, oh, you know, this fits very well with my long-term plan. I do see synergy behind what they're doing and what we potentially will be able to use. For example, DBS also actually invests in a lot of fintech companies, smaller fintech companies, because as a bank, you may not want to start multiple companies, right? So you wait for those small startups to be very successful, where you have a sizable stake, and that will help you to spur your future revenue growth, right? So in the corporate VC, they are not really very interested in with the ROI. They are interested in the corporate gains. That means the corporate synergy. How does this fit their long-term vision? How does this add value to their shareholders? And in corporate VCs, they normally will take a back seat. They'll give you money, but they're not going to run the show. They are not interested in taking up board, representations. So private VCs, they are very, very active. They want to have so many number of seats in your board. They want to actually have a certain amount of guarantee in terms of investment returns, right? So these are two bigger versions of VCs. Okay, so how does this private and public VCs fund these companies? Two forms: venture capital. Straight away, I give you money. Okay, and venture capital are very, very high risk, very, very fluid cash. Only invest in high risk and high growth companies. Okay, and in return, they want involvement. They are so involved that sometimes you think that the company belongs to them. Okay, they will also actually look at venture capital funding from different stages. Okay, once a venture capitalist decides to put money into a company, they are not going to give you a large tranche of money and say, okay, here's $1 billion, take it and go. Don't come back asking for more. They will never do that. They are going to do it in stages. Okay, so that's when you have a pre-seed, you have a seed funding, you have actually stage A, stage B. Okay, pre-seed, then followed by seed, followed by early stage, and then of course late stage. Okay, so what's pre-seed? That means you have a MVP. Okay, minimal viable proposition. That means there's a good business idea, but you're not officially out in the market yet. You're not officially launched. Okay, so you need some basic funding. Okay, to prove your MVP, right? And then seed funding is when, yes, I incorporate a company, now I'm officially in the market, but I need to start to have my own office, I need to start to hire staff. Okay, that's a seeding stage. Okay, and then once you've proven yourself, you reach certain milestones, that's when you go into Series A. Okay, after Series A, then you have B, C, okay, D, E, F, G, so on and so forth. Okay, some of you say, okay, wow, this sounds very complicated. How does it work? Let me show you a chart. This is how it works. Okay, these are the different stages of a VC funding. Okay, let's just make it simple. Seed stage. Earlier I mentioned about seed stage. So pre-seed is way before the seed stage. All right. So as you go into business planning, sometimes you may want to involve rich individuals, also known as business angels. If you don't want to, you just get VCs into the picture. All right. Okay, they'll go for early stage and then followed by A, B, C, D, 𝗟𝗂𝗃, so on and so forth. Right now, okay, $100 billion worth unicorns. Don't stop at C. C is not enough to give them the money that they want. Okay, a lot of them are in stage F. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay, so stage F is when they can actually really get a lot of money, okay, and build, okay, their valuation sky high, so high that they are probably able to match the GDP of certain countries. All right, so this is actually a graphical illustration. So I will not spend too much on this because it can be quite a fair bit, okay, for people who are not so interested. So I just show you the actually the path, how it works. So if I put it on a very simple graph, okay, how does this work? Let's put the venture capitalist in the middle. Okay, so don't care really whether it's private or is it corporate. Don't really care about that. Just assume it's a VC. Okay, so this VC doesn't have a lot of money to spare, definitely not 10 billion. So this VC will go to the limited partners on the left side. Okay, and who are the limited partners? Collectively, they could be pension funds. In Singapore, your pension fund is CPF. Okay, they will go to insurance companies, okay, where they say that they have an asset management, so limited to people like AIA or AIG Group, or they may be turning to actually people like Manulife, okay, Great Eastern, so on and so forth. So these insurance companies will have some spare funds as well. They'll turn to family offices, okay, very, very rich family offices, and say, okay, park some of your spare funds with me, okay, or maybe some of your actually retirement funds. Okay, park it over here. And then high net worth, extreme high net worth people like Bill Gates. Okay, or endowments. All right, endowment funds. These are usually retirement funds. For example, Singapore doesn't have this, but in European countries and American countries, when a civil servant, okay, is about retire, they're entitled to pension funds. So these pension funds are collectively known as endowments. Okay, all right, and then of course you can turn to domestic holdings. You can turn to actually the government, okay, of countries for all these funds. So the venture capitalists may not have so much spare cash in the beginning. It's fine, but they have connections to go to these limited partners and persuade them, park your excess money with me. Okay, 10 years down the road, I promise to come back to you, give you a principal plus your interest. And limited partners will be sure, take it. I trust you. Take this money, but I want a 10% or 20% increase. Okay, I'm looking for a 50% interest. So these VCs will happily take the money from limited partners, okay, under the promise of 10 years. And once this VC has money, he will spend the next 3 to 5 years putting part of this money into companies on the right. So these are some examples. Okay, they'll put a sum of this money into these companies. Okay, and before they put, they will set certain terms and conditions. RedMart, Grab, you want me to put 2 billion in you? No problem. Here are my terms and conditions. Okay, so after 3 to 5 years, okay, the VC will have to think about how to exit from these companies, either through IPOs or through mergers and acquisition. They will have to find a way, because if they don't find a way to exit, these limited partners will be asking for their funds back in 10 years, right? Okay, they can't roll the extra funds. So they will normally exit from all these high net worth companies, okay, innovative companies, and gain a profit, return the principal back to the limited partners, okay, plus interest. So this is actually a very simple circular model of what VCs are looking for. So where do they make the money? I take the money from limited partners. I promise them 10 years, I will pay back. But after I take the money, I throw this money into all these companies. For the next 3-5 years, I exit. I exit usually with a profit. I return principal back to the LP. I'll retain the rest. Okay, so this is a very simple way of how they make their money. Okay, without even spending much of their own. Okay, and sometimes you'll be asking, okay, as a VC, because they are high risk, okay, there's a lot of risk factors or unknowns that I'm gambling with. A VC will never invest in just one company. You'll invest in a portfolio of companies. Okay, and sometimes when they invest in 10 companies like this, okay, company 1, company 2, company 3, very, very interesting, but they probably die within the first 3 years, or maybe within the next 5 years. Okay, as in close, completely close, fold. They're gone. So gone are the VC's money as well. No problem. Okay, take the money and go. Company 4, 5, 6 can be a zombie. That means they are very stagnant. They are not as exciting. They are not making as much money as possible. They're just okay. They're just sleeping. Okay, dormant. But 7, 8, 9 seems to be more interesting. Okay, they take the money, they break even. Company 7, take the money, they break even. That's fine. Company 8, take the money, give it back 2 folds. Company 9, 3 folds. Okay, what they are interested in is company 10. Okay, company 10, take $1, give you back $15 in return. So if you collectively add 7, 8, 9, okay, and 10 together, you have 16 folds. Okay, assuming if all these companies share equal stake, 16 folds. How much have I invested? I invested 10 folds, but I took back 16 folds. I'm 6-fold richer, even though some companies die in the process. It's fine. This is what VCs do. They will have a portfolio. They will never put all the eggs in the same basket. All right. Okay. So what's the difference between VCs and business angels? Okay, business angels are different. These are individuals. They have a lot of cash. Okay. They have very good knowledge of the industry. They're usually coming from the industry. You could be thinking of them as very retired, very successful businessmen. Okay. They invest very, very early. Okay. In exchange for equity. They provide support. Okay. They have a very wide network of contacts, usually within the same industry. So some people may ask, okay, business angels. So how does it differentiate from, how can we differentiate business angels from corporate VCs or private VCs? Business angels, as much as they are probably well-to-do, they are never as rich as the VCs, because business angels, their disposable, okay, amount of injection of funds is up to 1 million. Compare this to the VCs who have tens and hundreds of billions at their disposal. So business angels are considered small fries, but they are still important because in the innovation ecosystem, okay, if a VC don't buy your idea, maybe a business angel will, especially if they really like, okay, the business proposition. So these are three of the very, very common, okay, people that can turn to: the corporate VCs, the private VCs, and the business angels, right? So to give you actually a better idea of how common these people are, on screen, I have some of these very, very big companies. Okay, I think you probably will know a few, okay, easily. Facebook, Grab, Skype, eBay, Google, YouTube. These are all VCs back and business angels back. Much more VCs back, because to scale, they need a lot of money, usually in the billions. Okay, so don't say that actually you do not really know much about VCs. Actually, to a certain extent, you're probably using a service, a product provided by a VC-backed company. Okay, Apple is also another illustration. All right, Apple actually do have some VC funding as well. So how can they actually obtain these funds? Okay, so usually for these young companies, right, at the beginning I mentioned, founders, you turn to yourself. Okay, you look at your own savings, right? You usually don't want to actually have salary, you stock it out. Okay, you bootstrap, you start on your own. Or you can turn to families and friends. Okay, you convince them, you know, my company really has a lot of potential. I have a great business idea. Give me some of your savings, okay, or lend me some money. So usually, these friends and relatives will part with their money because they probably trust you, or probably because they can't say no to you, right? So these are some of the key things that actually a business startup goes through. The other source is business angels, okay, where they come in at a startup to early growth stage. Okay, these business angels can only invest up to 1 mil. They have limited funds because it's their own money. Okay, they don't have institutional investors, okay, to actually to take money from. So business angels take their own actually capital and they inject into you. All right. And of course, you have the VCs. VCs will come in during the early stage, early growth stage. And venture capitalists would always want you to have some skin in the game. That means you will not go to a venture capitalist and ask for funding when you yourself are not prepared to stake everything you have in your own company. Okay, VCs will look for skin. As you go in different stages, from pre-seed to seed to stage 1, stage B, C, D, so on and so forth. All right. And then finally, okay, I mentioned this very briefly. You can also depend on banks, okay, when you have a proven track record, or you can expect people to buy over, okay, buy you over, right? So banks, okay, do only lend when cash flow is good, when you have collaterals. IPOs are very, very rare because usually they must prove that they have a very viable value proposition. They must have a certain number of years of good financial performance. Okay, acquisitions are much more common because you just basically wait for someone to buy over you. All right. So these are actually all the sources of finances that a business can lay their hand on as they grow, as they start, as they mature, as they become successful. Right? Different stages, different types of funds will be at their disposal. But I want to actually focus especially on IPOs because that's the ultimate aim of all VCs. So what's an IPO? For people who are not very, very good with finance, no worries, we're not talking about numbers here. IPO is when a private limited company decides to get listed on the board, a main board, okay, so that members of public can freely go to this stock exchange and buy their shares in return for an agreed amount of money. Okay, so it becomes very, very fluid. Okay, so these founders or these VCs will try to sell off their private equity, their stock, okay, and cash themselves out. Okay, and normally when they have this abundance of cash after IPO, these founders will go back, start another new startup. Okay, start from scratch. They start another new company and they try to repeat this success again. All right. So IPOs are the ultimate aim, and IPOs are also the way that all VCs hope to achieve, because that is boom town Charlie. They will receive a lot of returns, so much force that much more than what they initially invested in the company. Okay, so it's a fastest way where a VC can really exit and say that yes, I've done it, I'm successful. Okay, and I can expect a huge return on funds. So having said that, I still have not demystified. How do I know? Where do I find all these unicorns? And why are they so special? I mean, I've seen a lot of private startup companies out there. Okay. But where are they? Where exactly are they? And how common are they? All right. So this is a question I need to help you to solve. Right? Okay, when you look at unicorns, we can look at unicorns by nationality. That means based on the country where they are founded. Okay. There are 5 top host companies of unicorns. You realize that actually more than half, okay, of all the unicorns out there are in the United States. Collectively, they have 487, okay, out of the 900 over unicorns in the world. So it's a very actually robust market for unicorns. Okay, second runner up goes to China. Okay, second runner up where they have 170, okay, unicorns. But interestingly, although China don't have the largest share of the unicorns, they have the most highly valued unicorn, and that will be your TikTok. Okay, TikTok is the highest value unicorn right now as we speak, and it comes from China. Okay, and then followed by India. So these 3 countries, mega countries, control almost close to 60% of all unicorns in the world, and then followed by UK and Germany. So some of you may say, okay, I see Singapore. So where's Singapore? Okay, Singapore is here. All right, small little gray slide. Okay, gray share of the pie. But Singapore, from 1.5 years ago, when I did an initial presentation on this, till 1.5 years later, Singapore has grown. Okay, not in terms of size, but they have grown in terms of number of unicorns. 1.5 years ago, we only have barely 6 unicorns. Today, Singapore, we have 12 unicorns. Okay, so some of you may not even remember we were like 12. Okay, 1.5 years ago, I was still talking about people like Grab. 1.5 years later, this unicorn has disappeared completely. Grab is no longer unicorn. Anyone knows why? Okay, if you know why, please put in the chat session. Later, we can have a very interesting discussion on why Grab is not unicorn. Some of you say, oh, okay, maybe Grab is not a unicorn, is fine. How about Airbnb? Airbnb is not a unicorn too. They have disappeared from this unicorn ecosystem. Okay, so Airbnb, Grab is no longer unicorn. All right, but instead you hear of emerging ones like Ninja Van. Ninja Van is a new unicorn. Okay, and it's part of this gray slide. Okay, all right. So when we look at actually VCs, okay, when I was doing this research, I find it interesting because you see, I think first I want to know where they come from, which country hosts them. Secondly, I want to know, okay, these VCs, since they are compared to sharks in the ocean, I'm sure these sharks have a very acute sense of hunger, okay, of thirst for blood. And if they are going to smell blood, they definitely know where the food is. So where do these VCs put their money? And what do they put their money in? Again, that was the other part of my research. When we sort them by industries, okay, these are all the industries, as you can see. These are all the industries that VCs invest in. Okay, but there are 5 very glaring industries that VCs love. Fintech is number 1. Okay, almost coming close to 20% of all VC funding go to fintech companies. Okay, and fintech right now is the largest share of industry where they have the most number of unicorns. Second will be internet services. things that are platform based, okay, where you have people like Alibaba, you have Grab, you have Q10, okay. These are what we call internet services, okay, platform based. And then finally, you have e-commerce, all right, people that sells you everything online, okay, Tokyo, these are all the e-commerce giants, all right. And then finally, AI, all right. Okay, and of course, the last in the list, okay, also top 5, but it's a new entrant. 1.5 years ago, I didn't see it. 1.5 years later, it came out of nowhere. Healthcare, all right, health tech. Health tech is actually a very fast climbing, all thanks to COVID. Okay, right now, a lot of these unicorns are receiving a boost because of the prevalence of telemedicine, right? So if you're scared of getting COVID, okay, you don't want to visit a hospital, you don't want to go to your normal GP, telemedicine is the way to go. And that's where actually a lot of health tech companies are founded on. So number 1 to number 4, okay, this top 4 has always been there 1.5 years ago. 1.5 years later, okay, number 5, okay, is replaced. If you're curious to know which is number 5, okay, 1.5 years ago, that's actually transportation. People like Grab, people like your TT Choosing, that's number 5. Okay, today, transportation and logistics, they are nowhere near top 10. All right, so they drop quite a lot, and in place, healthcare receives a boost. Okay, so let's look at actually a bit more. I mean, other than the industries, I was also curious to find out where exactly they are. Okay, and how do they compare versus each another? So if we look at the green colored actually bar charts, these are those unicorns found in Americas. So Americas means North America and South America combined. Okay, I combine these 2 continents into one. Europe, the whole of Europe, I don't really care whether it's Eastern Europe or Western Europe. I put them into the same continent as well. And of course, Asia Pacific. Okay, Asia Pacific will include people like, for example, Australia. Okay, Asia plus Oceania. So they will form Asia Pac. So you will realize, okay, one thing just by a visual view. You realize that America's unicorns are based on 2 very outstanding industries. Okay, fintech and internet software. So you'll be asking, okay, I'm not in America, so I don't really care. So where should I put my money? Look at actually Europe. You realize that they are also focusing a lot on fintech, okay, e-commerce, right? But there are certain industries that ignore completely. For example, telcos. They are not interested. VCs in Europe are not interested in telcos. VCs in Europe are also not interested in edtech, education tech. They have 0 unicorns in a certain way, right? They are not willing to put money into all these unicorns. And you realize actually in Asia Pac, something is changing. Okay, in Asia Pac, fintech is second runner up to America, right? You also realize that Asia Pac focus on e-commerce much higher than America. Okay, some of you may be asking why. Does it mean that our e-commerce landscape is not so robust, or is it our retail landscape is not so robust? You got it right. It's exactly because the retail market is not as sophisticated as the Americas. That's why the e-commerce, okay, unicorns have a bigger stake, okay, a bigger actually opportunity to grow in Asia Pac, right? So at least at one glance, you can actually literally tell, okay, different continents, different VCs will put their money in different categories. Okay, and if you're someone who's very tech savvy, or you're someone who would like to go into investments, my advice, look at this chart. You know where to put your money. Okay, because anything that VCs put their money in, high chance is going to succeed, especially when it's sky high. Okay, look at internet software, sky high. All right, so it's definitely worth consideration for putting your hard-earned money. Okay, and then finally, I'm going to actually start talking a bit more about how they select. How do they even select all these young companies? Okay, what are the criteria? This is a process. Okay, you'll put all these young companies through a 4-stage process. Opportunity. First, you must know the VCs. The VCs must be comfortable. Okay, must run you an audience, must be able to listen to you, spend some time to sit down, go through a business plan. And interestingly, at the opportunity introduction stage, okay, it's about connection. You need to have access to a VC, or someone must introduce you to a VC. And then finally, you get past, you go into the initial screening stage. When you go into the initial screening stage, they'll ask you, can you show me your business plan? Can you show me your MVP, which is minimum viable proposition? And at this stage, okay, only 5% of business plans are read beyond the executive summary. So people who are in business, you will know, executive summary are usually a 1 page or half a page report, okay, meant for very, very busy people like your bosses. So if VCs don't read even the first page, okay, of your business plan, that means high chance you're not going to get the funding. So only 5% goes beyond stage 2, right? Initial screening. And then the VCs, if they're excited, they think, yeah, maybe there's something I can look at. That's when they start the whole due diligence process. They tell you surrender the books. Okay, show me your whole entire process. How are you going to get, okay, all these actually products or services to the market? Okay, how are you going to prove that you're going to be successful one day? So there's a lot of negotiation that happens as well during the due diligence. Right. Finally, VC says, yes, I think you have a very, very good idea. I'm willing to part with my investment in you. How much do you want me to invest? In return for how much shares? Or for how much, okay, interest in return? So it's interesting because when a company, a young company goes through this 4 stage, okay, many of them drop out along the way because only 6 out of 1,000 companies will pass through these 4 stages and get money at the end. Okay, and a lot of them eventually don't even receive. Okay, the other 994 doesn't receive a single cent. So here VCs actually go through a very, very closely needed, okay, due diligence process, scrutiny. They scrutinize every single thing that they can lay their hands on. And if you're successful, you're one of the 6, congratulations. They will start to talk to you about venture capital deal. Okay, how much do you want to put into your company? How much? State the amount. In return, if I put this money into your company, how much shares do I get? Okay, what's the percentage I'll be getting? Do I get any seats in your board of directors? And if yes, how many seats? So these are all during the negotiation stage, which is the last stage. And they will also talk about bad scenarios. For example, liquidation. What if things don't fall through according to plan? What if one day you become bankrupt? Okay, I will still need to actually save my skin. Okay, I want to have an exit plan. And if you're successful, okay, or you're proven successful, how much interest do I gain? And finally, do I need to give any of your current existing founders, okay, or employees stock option? So these are some of the things that VCs talk about, okay, behind closed doors with the founders of the innovative young companies. All right. So ultimately, what actually happens before a VC puts their money really depends on both parties, how they're going to work that out. Okay, this is the example that I share. Okay, so earlier I mentioned don't need to take out calculators, no need for calculus. Let's have scenario 1, stage 1. Okay, stage 1, a new startup. In this case, the founder is John. John says that, yeah, okay, I have a good idea. I want to start something. Let me bring my friend, Ivan, who's very good in IT, to be my co-founder. Okay, but John and Ivan, because they just started working not long ago, they have very limited funds, savings. Okay, they may decide to rope in their friends and family. So eventually, they decided to pool a sum of money. They start a company. John, being the brainchild, takes 65% of the shares. Ivan, co-founder, well, don't really have a lot of funds, take 15%. And the remaining 20% are taken up by friends and family. Okay, so this is stage 1. Okay, and at stage 1, there's no involvement of VCs. Stage 2, okay, John and Ivan, through their hard work, through their determination, succeeds. Eventually prove they have a very good business plan and a business model. They decided to bring a VC. Okay, this VC is known as Avantis Ventures. Okay, and when they found this VC, okay, John and Ivan plus a family and friends were hoping, okay, to scale, I probably need at least another 300K. Okay, I need the VC to pump another 300K into me so I can build new machines. I can probably afford a new office, so on and so forth. So Advantage Ventures is being approached for an initial investment of 300K. Okay, and Advantage Ventures says, okay, 300K, sure. Let me put 300K in you, but I want 40% of your shares. Okay, and this 40% of shares, because it's equal to 300K, right? Your company is effectively worth 750K now. Okay, before the venture companies come in, evaluation is 450K. But now, because you want the VC to pump in 300K, the company's worth is 750K. Okay, with the VC taking 40% of all the stocks, okay, and shares. And then eventually, okay, dilution, because when the VC comes in, he takes 40% of the shares, right? The remaining 60% of the diluted company will have to be shared among John, Ivan, and the rest of the family and friends. Okay, so they will have to rearrange the percentage split. So John, being the founder, still retains a big percentage. Okay, from the initial 65%, it drops down to 32.5%. Okay, and then Ivan, from 15% drops to 7.5%. Family and friends plus management pool, because stock options take 10% each. So the company is still worth 750K. Okay, it's just that when it comes to the sharing of the equity share, the percentage is going to be lower eventually for everyone who started this. Okay, so it's still very actually a good split. Okay, here comes the challenge. All right, so the venture capitalist comes in. Yes, I put 750. Your company is worth 750K now. Hooray! Okay, it's almost worth 1 million. And three to 4 years later, the company succeeds to a certain extent. Okay, the VC says, okay, you have succeeded. Good. I want to sell away my shares. I want to sell away the entire company. And who's the majority shareholder here? The VC is the majority shareholder because of 40%. They don't really need to have 51% to be a majority shareholder. They are the majority shareholder. Okay, because John, even though he's a founder, he has only 32%. He cannot outvote, okay, the largest shareholder. So, and it's stated inside usually a VC agreement. If the VC wants to exit, you have to exit. Okay, so the VC was lucky, found someone who's willing to buy, okay, the company for 2 mil. Okay, the net worth is 750K. This company is now worth 2 mil because people want to buy it for 2 mil. Okay, and then the Advantage Ventures would do this. Because I'm the largest shareholder, okay, and in your venture capital agreement, you said that I'll take 49% of all proceeds. When I have a profitable return, I'm going to take almost 1 mil. Okay, and then John, Ivan, okay, friends, etc., will collect the remaining. Okay, so 2 mil is paid out, but you realize that the venture capitalists will always take the largest share of the proceeds or the profits when things are in their favor. Okay, because I only put 300K, now I'm getting 980K. My return is almost 3-fold. That's when it's a very successful company. Okay, eventually proves themselves. What if this company doesn't make it, okay, and makes a loss? That's the second scenario here. Okay, so assuming now the company is not doing too well, okay, the VCs say, okay, I've given up. I don't think your company has a future. I don't want to make any more losses. I want to cut my loss. I want to exit. Eventually they found someone to buy over the whole company for 500K. Okay, earlier I mentioned the same company is valued at 750K, but when they sold at 500K, they're making a loss of 250K, right? It's a very bad exit. The VCs will not lose because the VCs will say, yes, it's a bad exit, but in your venture capital agreement, I am supposed to take 76% of your profits when things go wrong. Thank you very much. The VCs will collect 380. So how much did they invest? Okay, earlier I mentioned they invest how much? 300K. Now, even though it's a bad exit, they will still take 380K. Do you think they are losing? I put 300K, I take back 380K. It's a bad exit. I still make a profit of 80K. Okay, that's the scenario of a bad exit. So poor John, Ivan, and the rest, they will suffer because there's lesser for them eventually. At the end of the day, they will have to suck it up. Okay. So in comparison, this is what you see. When it's a good exit, okay, the VCs earn. When it's a bad exit, the VCs earn as well. It's just a matter of how much. That's why they are known as sharks in the ocean. They will smell blood and they will bite and kill, okay, for flesh. All right. So sometimes actually you have no choice, right? Because when you have your own small little startup, you want to scale, you think you have your big plans, you have a grand vision, you need external help. So sometimes you're forced. But I think sometimes when you have VCs coming in, it's always actually a good and a bad. It's probably not more negative things. Okay. So in this scenario, you realize that VCs will always make it good for themselves. It will never be for the founders. Although the founders will have also cash out in some way if it's actually a good exit. Okay, you can see that John, Ivan here, if they exit for 4 million, they earn a lot beyond their initial shares. But if they don't, they suffer a lot more. Okay, all right, so it's a double whammy. So ultimately, what will VCs want to see? Okay, before they invest in a young startup. Without boring too much, I give you an overview. These are a few things I look at. 95% of VCs look at management team, whether they know what they're doing, whether they do have the expertise. Can they really scale up the company? Okay. There's a typo error here. This is customers. Okay. So they are look at your market segment, they look at your potential, they look at your products. So these three things are the most important. Your management team, your customers and market potential, and your products and services. Okay. And the rest doesn't really matter as much, although they still matter, but the three burning reasons for them is your management expertise, okay, and followed by your great products, etc. All right. So with that, I hope you actually enjoy what I've shared so far. It's a very, very quick overview. I know some of you may find that it's a bit too much to crunch, a bit hard to absorb. Okay, it's reasonably fine. Okay. Why I say that? Because not everybody on the streets will eventually know or come across a VC. But if you do, make that golden opportunity, okay, to make your elevator pitch. Okay, somehow or rather, I hope you'll be able to get greater access, okay, to a brighter future. And of course, greater success for your startup company.